Hello, welcome or welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Mary, and today is going to be my September wrap-up. We're in a new spot, so I'm sitting on the floor in front of my shelves. If you've seen my vlog from this week, I'll link it in the card down below if you haven't. I sat here for some of the updates, and I liked the way it looked in those, but I feel like I don't like the way it looks right now, so we might be back to the office in the next video that you see me in, but I thought I would try this for today. So, if you haven't seen a wrap-up from me before, typically the way I do this is I start with my statistics for the month, and then after I do my stats, I go into each book and give a little review. I do it in chronological order because it's just easier for me that way. So in this month of September, I did manage to read 12 books. I read no 1-star books, no 2-star books, no DNFs. I read 5 3-star books, 6 4-star books, and 1 5-star book. But that is a 3.66 star average, which is pretty good. I don't remember what my average was last month. I managed to read a total of 4,397 pages, which is actually, I think, lower than last month. I want to say I've been reading around 6,000 pages. So while I read more books in September, I think I read fewer pages total. For the demographics, I read 0 middle grade or children's books, 2 young adult books, 0 new adult books, and 10 adult books. For the demographics of the authors that I read from, I read 6 books from male authors, 5 books from female authors, and 1 book from a non-binary author. I also managed to read 4 books from people of color or authors of color, and that leaves 8 books from white authors. And I did just want to point out that my POC category is non-Black POC, so I did not read any books by Black authors this month. That's something I'm really trying to work on. I'm pretty good about my male to female author ratio. Typically in most months, I actually usually read more from female authors than male authors, which is interesting. But I have noticed that I read a large proportion of books from white authors, which is something that I'm actively working on changing. My dogs are driving me crazy. So if you can hear like digging and jumping around, that's my dogs. I have 2 of them. They're great, but they're also insane. And because I'm out in my living room, I can't really lock them into a different room this time. Usually I'm in my office and I can just close the door, but not today. And as if I called him. What are you doing over here? Hi. You wanna say hi? Look. You wanna say hi to them? Good boy. Okay, go lay down. Go lay down. Go on. No. What are you doing, Turkey? Okay, he'll sit here. This is fine. He'll go away at some point. While we're on author statistics, I also read 2 books by Own Voices authors with Own Voices representation. That might make more sense. I don't know how to phrase it properly, but that might make more sense when we get into the individual books that I read. For genres, I read 1 science fiction, 2 nonfiction, 2 classics, 3 fantasy, 2 romance, and 1 historical fiction. I had to double check. Which is, quite a few genres. I did read from quite a few genres. I'm really bad at categorizing genres for myself. I typically use the most common genre that something is shelved on Goodreads, which I know is not always very accurate, but I don't know. I feel like I read a lot of things, not a lot, but there were at least 2 books here where I was like, this could really go in multiple genres. So, and for the way that I consumed these books, I listened to 2 books via audio. I read 4 books physically. I read 4 books via ebook, and I had 2 books that I listened to while I read. I also read one of these books. I didn't mention this already. It was one of the physical books that I read, and it was one of the books that I read while I listened to, and I got it from the library. So I don't have it here to show you today, but I do have that. So now that I've had this very jumbled intro, I think it's time to just tell you about the books that I read. Okay, so the first book that I read during the month of September is Bad Blood by John Carreyrou. This is a nonfiction following Elizabeth Holmes, who is the founder of the startup. Gosh, now I can't remember the name of it. I'll put it on the screen if I look it up. But it's basically like a tech company that was supposed to be able to like prick your finger and use a drop of blood and test you for all these different diseases and figure out like your hemoglobin count and all sorts of things. And essentially she lied about her product working to people who were like backers and financiers and investors. That's the word I was looking for. And so she ran this startup company and just lied about everything that the product could do, and everyone who worked with her was like, hey, this product won't do that, and she kept suing her former employees for telling people that the product didn't work, and it was pretty insane. I think this didn't break until like 2015 or 2017 too. So the journalist who broke the story to the New York Times is actually who wrote the book. So it was really good. I listened to this via audiobook that I got from my library. I would recommend it if you're interested in that sort of thing. I think I gave it 4 stars. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I don't know. I just think stuff like that is so fascinating. Then the second book that I read was The Library at Mount Char by Scott Hawkins. I had to double check my notes. And I did give this one 4 stars as well. So this is like a science fiction fantasy type of book. I don't want to say too much about it because I feel like part of the fun of reading it is figuring out what's going on. But it basically follows this group of 30-something, like early 30s people who live in this library, and they're each assigned a category or a catalog that they learn everything about when they're children. And so like one of them has the category of animals, and so he knows how to communicate with all the animals and how animals live and stuff like that. Another one has the category of death, and so she understands everything about death. And then there's one guy who has the category of war, and so he knows everything about like every war that's ever happened. I don't really want to say more than that. Honestly, I really enjoyed it. It was very weird. If you don't like weird books, I would not recommend going into this one. But if you're okay with like a weird horror-y fantasy sci-fi type story, I would totally recommend it. Like if you... Middle Game is another like really weird book that's sort of about 2 people who know a lot about... 2 siblings, I guess, who know a lot about their particular realm, and they're gonna combine to take over the world. This is like almost a similar concept to that. It's a little different, but it's similar. I don't really want to say more than that, but it's so good if you're like into weird stuff. I think about it sometimes because I still am not sure exactly what happened. It's one of those books that I want to purchase. I read this as an ebook that I got on loan from my library. I want to purchase it so that I can read it again to really understand what was going on. But it was really good. The third book that I read was The Winter's Curse by Marie Rutkoski. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but I also gave this 4 stars. This is a YA fantasy romance about a young girl named Kestrel who is the daughter of a general in this like great empire, and her like culture is just very centered on war, and they have they like capture other lands and enslave the people who were part of that land. And the people where she lives, the people who were there before, are called the Harani. And so it's about her falling in love basically with a Harani slave boy. And then there's a slave rebellion and the roles sort of reverse. And it's about her and this slave boy's love story. But it's also mostly just about her like becoming herself. Negatives of this, I would say, is if you're expecting a lot of world building and fantasy elements, it's not really in there. Mostly the reason that it's like fantasy is because it's not set in our world, but it's not really set somewhere that's like, I don't know, it reminds me more of like a historical fantasy, not necessarily Game of Thrones, but almost like ancient Greece type of vibe is what I was getting from it. But also I think a lot of the court rules are very similar to like Tudor England. So just bearing that in mind, if you're looking for a lot of world building, I think you'll be disappointed. But also it's YA, so I think that kind of goes with the territory. Not that you can't have good world building in YA, just that I think YA is typically known for being more accessible to people who don't read a lot of fantasy. That's all I'm really saying on that. But the problems that I have with this book, and obviously I'm not the right person to really speak on like aspects of slavery being realistic. It was weird. It's very Stockholm syndrome-y. And, like, I still was rooting for the romance, but I felt weird about it the whole time. I don't know. If you've read this book, let me know how you feel about it. Because, like, the author tried to make it as not weird as possible, but I think just conceptually it was very strange. So it requires a lot of, like, suspension of disbelief. So, anyways, if any of those things are going to be, like, too problematic for you or something you're not interested in, I wouldn't recommend it. But if you like a YA romance, like a contemporary, or not contemporary, like a YA fantasy romance type of situation, I think you could enjoy this one. I also think the political intrigue is intriguing for me. That was like the only part of the world that they really delve into is like political intrigue and like cultural intrigue. Talks a bit about cultural appropriation, but I don't know In this book in particular, I'm wondering if that's going to be a main theme of the rest of the books, but I'm not like super hopeful for that. So I'm keeping my hopes pretty low, but I do think I will continue the series. Then I read and listened to The God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but this won the Booker Prize in the late 90s, I want to say. 98? I might be wrong. Don't quote me on that. But it was on the Rory Gilmore reading list, and I wanted to do the Rory Gilmore readathon that was hosted by Kira Foster. I didn't end up doing it. Spoiler alert. But if they do it again, I would like to attempt to do it a second time. But all that to say, I did read The God of Small Things, or rather listen to, and I liked it. It was slow to start for me, and then I really ended up enjoying it. I gave it 3 stars. I guess I should tell you what it's about since we're here. It's like a historical fiction set in India, and it follows a set of twins, a boy and a girl, who are raised by their mother, and she divorces their father, so she has to return to live with her parents. But I think she ends up living with like an aunt, Aunt Baby Kuchma, and their mother has a brother. So there's a lot of like parallels within the family line, and also a lot of, I don't know, there's back and forth. So there's a present tense set with the female twin coming back after getting divorced when she's the same age that her mother is when her mother died, or her mother was when her mother died. And so she's coming back to India from the US after getting divorced. And she's reuniting with her brother for the first time in like 10, 15 years, since maybe even longer, since their mom died, I think is the last time they saw each other. But it also does a lot of flashbacks to when they're children. And in particular, one summer, they have a cousin come visit them, and the cousin dies. And you know that at the very beginning of the book, but you don't know what happens. And so the whole story is kind of this convoluted telling of what happened that summer to them. And it's one of those coming of age stories where you don't realize that's what it's doing until it's over. The reason I gave this book 3 stars is because something happens. There's some subject matter in it that's particularly disturbing for me. And so I would check out content warnings before you read this. I did think it was really interesting to read about, it was India during the Cultural Revolution of like the 70s perhaps, 60s or 70s. It's like the communist regime in India, and what it was like being a family who formerly owned a company versus being in the communist revolution. And there were some family members that are pro-communism and some family members that are anti-communism. And it was really interesting to see how the caste system played into the communist revolt, because the whole point of communists is that workers should all unite. But in India, with their caste system, I'm not pretending to be an expert. I don't really know. This is what I've gathered from the book. I just want to put that out there as a disclaimer. But from what I understand with the caste system, the lowest caste is the untouchables. And the other people didn't want them to be able to join the revolution because they still wanted some kind of social hierarchy. So it was interesting watching how communism fit into India's social hierarchy, I guess, that they already had in place. But I do think this was a good book. There's a lot of like really fluid writing, a lot of beautiful like metaphors. This is the literary fiction that I read this month. And I think if you enjoy literary fiction and classics and books that are prize winners, I think you will enjoy this one. I would say just be careful and look up the content warnings before you read it. The next book that I read this month is In Cold Blood by Truman Capote, or Capote. I never know how to pronounce it. And this is a classic true crime. And I listened to it as an audiobook, and I think my expectations were too high. I gave this 3 stars. It wasn't bad. I wanted to love this book, and I don't feel like I did. It's a story of a family murder in Kansas. It's a small town in Kansas, and 2 strangers to them come into their homes in the middle of the night and tie them all up and murder them. I wish I could remember the family name, but I can't. And it is a true story, and they used a lot of, or Truman Capote for the book used a lot of documents, affidavits, and court report, like the court reporter script, and the testimony of the witnesses, and all the stuff is like real documents of real things he got, like interrogatories and all sorts of stuff. So it's like a very fascinating thing. And I've heard a lot of people tell me since I rated this kind of not low, I think I gave it like 6 out of 10 on my Instagram. If you don't follow me on Instagram, it's in the description box. I do all my book ratings on there. I also have Goodreads. That's in the description box as well. That's just an aside. But a lot of people reached out to me about my Instagram review of this, telling me like this is the most disturbing book they've ever read, and they were horrified by it. And I just feel like I don't agree. And it could be that I listen to so many true crime podcasts that I'm just like desensitized to the world of horrendous crimes. But it just didn't seem that bad to me. I don't know. Not that murdering a whole family isn't bad, because it absolutely is, and it's atrocious and terrifying. I don't know. I think I just was expecting to feel more gripped by this. I also think listening to it as an audiobook was a disservice to me because of how much of the book was actual like documentation from the time. I think that it would have been more beneficial to read that because it wasn't really introduced as like, this is the affidavit of so-and-so. But I saw I had an ebook of it as well. And on the ebook, you could really tell more. But I listened to it. I listened to it because I wanted it to be like a true crime podcast. And obviously it's not a podcast, so it doesn't surprise me that it didn't fulfill that like desire of mine, but I didn't really love it for that reason. I think I wanted something different out of it than what I got. Oh, good. I finally am at one that I own. So the next book that I read was East of Eden by John Steinbeck. God, the lighting in here is terrible. I'm so sorry. This is a chunker. I started this for Tome Topple because this is 601 pages and got like 30 pages in. I think I started it like the last Wednesday or Thursday and was just like, I'm not going to finish this. So I just put it down. And I'm glad that I did because I don't think I would have enjoyed it if I forced myself to get through it. Tome Topple wore me out. I don't know how people do that a lot. But I swear, after Tome Topple, I was like, I don't want to read anything for the rest of my life, which obviously I got over it pretty quick. But this one is about the Trask family. And I'm not going to hold it up the whole time because the lighting is annoying me. And it's not getting better. Ooh, if I do this, I look more even. That's fun. It's like one of those whatevers. I won't sit here for other videos. I apologize about this lighting. But East of Eden is about the Trask family. And specifically Adam Trask. And so it starts when he's a little boy and talks about his relationship with his father and his stepmother and his half-brother. And there's a lot of allusions, as you might be able to tell by the title, to biblical stories, specifically the story of Cain and Abel in the Garden of Eden. If you're not familiar, Cain and Abel are brothers, and God favors one over the other, so the other brother kills him. They're Adam and Eve's children. They're like the first sons of the earth. And so the surviving son is sent onto the earth, sent out of the Garden of Eden, onto the rest of the earth. I don't think they're even living in the Garden of Eden anymore. To be honest, it's been a long time since I looked into the Bible. But beside the point, that's basically the gist of the illusion there. And then it follows Adam when he meets his wife, this woman named Kate, who is essentially like kind of evil. If you've ever seen the movie with James Dean, which I watched after I read the book, the movie covers like a third of the book, probably a quarter of the book, but like the third quarter of the book. And then like it cuts to the end. It's very strange. I didn't love the movie, but I feel like on its own, it's fine. But it doesn't really fulfill the cyclical nature that I think the book is trying to show. So Adam and Kate wind up, oh my God, that is so funny. I have friends who are dating who are named Adam and Kate. I just put that together. Wow. That is so weird. Anyways, Adam and Kate end up in California. They move from the East Coast to California. And Kate has twin boys who she abandons like the day after they're born. And it's just like the lives of the boys growing up. And then this whole like family drama and like all the biblical allusions. I thought it was really, really good. I gave it 4 stars. I don't know if I've been saying the star count that I've given books, but I gave this one 4 stars. And I really enjoyed it and I would recommend it to people. The only thing I would say is it was too long. But the thing is, like, I feel like it was very well paced, but I was ready for it to be over about 112 pages out from the end. That's a random number, but like a little over 100, not quite 200, you know? But it's like the same story over and over of like one brother getting what the other brother wants. And then a father forsaking his son. And, you know, I don't know. I really enjoyed it. I don't know if that review made any sense, but I'm losing my mind here and my patience, so I need to keep going. Then I read, oh, here we go. Then I read Letters from the Earth by Mark Twain. This is a group of essays that Mark Twain wrote throughout his life, and it was published after he died. And so my biggest complaint, I gave this one 4 stars as well. My biggest complaint about this book is that it feels unfinished, and that's because it is, probably, in all likelihood. I don't think he ever planned on publishing it as is. I think he would have published it if he, like, finished the letters. It's a reimagining of God casting Satan out of heaven. And the reimagining is that the punishment is temporary. God isn't wonderful. Satan isn't bad. Everyone is just completely amoral. And it's like a deist, I guess, view. So, but it's basically Mark Twain critiquing modern Christianity and like the idea that there's a lot of, I want to be careful here because I'm not saying this stuff. I'm repeating what the book is saying. So if you want to attack somebody, you can shake your fist at Mark Twain, but I have nothing to say. It was a lot of critiquing of modern Christianity and in the way that it is hypocritical, and certain aspects of things that don't necessarily make a whole lot of sense. And just the idea that like the God that is in modern Christianity doesn't really make sense as a deity. And if that is the deity, then Mark Twain is saying that he doesn't understand why anyone would follow that type of being. And yeah, I don't want to like hurt anybody's feelings. I really liked this. I think if you are agnostic or a-religious, I think you would enjoy it. I think if you are like Christian or some type of actual organized religion within Judeo-Christianity, you might not like it as much. Unless you're hypercritical of your own religion, in which case you might enjoy it. But I just think it's the type of book that needs to be read by the right person or you're really not going to like it. Then I read The Jane Austen Book Club by Karen Joy Fowler. I gave this one 3 stars. This is a contemporary chick lit romance type thing. I categorize it in romance on here. I would say it's closer to contemporary, but it is what it is. This follows a group of women and one man who are in a book club together, and it sort of goes through each chapter is 1 month of the book club, and each month they read one of Jane Austen's works. So she has 6 published works. They read a book a month, so each month they read one of her works. That I'm just repeating myself over and over again. That is so annoying. But basically, it follows each of them through their struggles during the month that they host the book club. And I think it's supposed to be comparing and contrasting them to the characters in Jane Austen's works. The only Jane Austen work I've ever read is Pride and Prejudice. So I do plan on rectifying that and reading the rest of her catalog, but I just haven't gotten around to it. I enjoyed it. I thought it was cute. I gave it 3 stars. Nothing really happened that was fantastic. There were parts of it that I felt like weren't well enough filled out, and I would have preferred them to be bulked up a little bit more. But yeah, and I think I would have gotten a little bit more out of it had I read Jane Austen's full catalog, but I haven't. So if there were allusions to things that I haven't read, I didn't get them, frankly, and that's it. But I did think it was cute. I also watched the movie this month, and I will say I liked the movie just as much. Super cute, easy to watch. It also has, what is her name? John Krasinski's wife. That is so terrible. Emily Blunt, is that her name? I think she's in it, which is horrible. I just watched it. Why can't I remember? But it's really cute. If you haven't seen it, I would recommend it. If you haven't read it and you're interested in it, I would recommend it as well. It's pretty sweet. I think it was published in 2005, so it's not super recent, but I don't know. I feel like I like the concept of a book club. Like sitting down for tea with a group of older ladies. That seems to be something that I like because I really enjoyed Grady Hendrix's Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. And I liked that it was like suburban moms who were in a book club together and they were reading, in that one they were reading like In Cold Blood and horrible like true crime books. But I digress. I would like to be in a book club. My mom is in a book club, and the book club ladies are her best friends, and I am jealous. Anyways, the next book that I read was The Bride Test by Helen Hoang. This is about a Vietnamese American man named Kai Depp who is autistic, and he has no real interest in a romantic relationship, but his mother wants him to get married, so she goes back to Vietnam and decides that she's going to find him a wife there. And she picks out this woman who is half American, half Vietnamese, but grew up in Vietnam and has a young daughter. Kai's mom goes to Vietnam, gets her. Let me look up her name. Esme. Her name's not Esme, but she changes it to Esme in America, so I'm going to use her American name. But Kai's mom goes and gets Esme and brings her back to the U.S. for one summer and says, you'll live with my son. He'll treat you like a fiance. He'll take you out to all the family weddings. And if you guys don't fall in love and get married at the end of the summer, then you can just go back to Vietnam and it'll be fine. And that'll be that. And so it's about Esme and Kai, like, falling in love. And it's a little bit of a, like, not hate to love, because they never hate each other. I give this book 5 stars, by the way. I loved this book. I thought it was so great. Part of it was the autism representation, and part of it was just, like, I thought they had a lot of chemistry. And I've seen on Goodreads that a lot of people disagree with me, but I thought their chemistry was really good. There's also on-page sex in this book, so if you don't like that, not for you. But also, it's not a ton. I think there's, like, 3 instances that were actual stuff. So just skip through those and you should be fine. But it was really cute. And I really appreciated the way that they, like, slowly got into things, which seems weird because they're living together, but, like, there's not the one bed trope. She's in the spare bedroom at first, and it's about how she has to learn, because of his autism, he likes things a certain way. And so it's about how she has to learn how to do things the way that he wants them to be done. And he has to learn that maybe he does like another person, and, like, he has to learn how to be in a relationship because he's never been in one, and learn how to treat her to not make her feel bad. And it's just, I thought it was so cute. I really loved it. I recommend it. If you're a romance reader, I think you would like that one. I want to read The Kiss Quotient. I ended up getting this at Savers, and I was worried to read it before I read The Kiss Quotient, but apparently they just follow the same, like, family. Like, I think one of the weddings that Kai and Esme went to was the wedding of the couple in The Kiss Quotient. So I guess you know how that one ends. But it's a romance. Like, how else is it going to end? I'm just saying. For me, for romance especially, the how is much more important than the what. Like, what happens that isn't really a spoiler, because you can still enjoy, like, how it happens. Anyways, that's my 2 cents on that. The next book that I finished was The Book of Lost Friends, which I also own by Lisa Wingate. I finally read this one. This is a historical fiction. I ended up giving this 3 stars. Yeah, I gave this 3 stars. This is a historical fiction following 2 timelines. In the first timeline, it follows 3 girls who are in post-Civil War, but, like, just post-Civil War Mississippi. And then the other timeline follows a teacher at an inner city school in that city where they were in Mississippi, but she's in the 80s. And she's helping her students do a school project to understand the history of their town and how so many of them are interrelated through the plantation that used to be basically in the town. And so it's interesting. I don't really know how to follow it. In the 1880s timeline, one of the girls, or I guess 1870s might be when it is, I don't really know. One of the girls is a slave at the house, Hattie. Another one of the girls is the white daughter of the slave owner, the plantation owner, and his wife. And then there's another girl who is from Louisiana, and she is the mixed race daughter of the plantation owner with his mistress in New Orleans. And all of them are going to find the plantation owner because they need his will to show what part of the land goes to whom. Because the mixed race daughter obviously is not the plantation owner's wife's daughter. And so she wants to make sure that she's going to get the land in Texas that her dad promised her when she was growing up, even though, like, because she's worried that his wife will try to, like, cheat her out of her inheritance or something. Then his daughter, his full white daughter, this is so confusing for me. I wish I remember their names, but I don't. I'm sorry. The full white daughter is worried that the girl, basically, she's worried that the girl will cheat her out of her inheritance, and she has a brother, and she's worried that her brother will be cheated out of his inheritance. And then Hattie has been working on a tenant farm, but Hattie's worried that because the plantation owner's wife doesn't like, she's a lot meaner to slaves than he was. There is no good slave owner in this story, which I really appreciated, but because she's like mean and vindictive, and Hattie doesn't think she'll keep her word. She thinks that she'll rip up the papers and that they'll be stuck with nothing, basically, at the end of it. And also, this is the most important part of the book, and I completely forgot to talk about it because I feel like it's such a small part of the actual book, which is why I didn't give this book more stars than I did. But there's this thing called the Book of Lost Friends, which is a real thing that used to happen. And it was for former slaves after World War II. After the Civil War, Jesus Christ. After the Civil War, Black churches started popping up, and they had a newspaper. I believe it was called the Southwestern Times, maybe. And basically, the reverends of these churches were Black men, typically, who could read. And they would write the family histories of people who were looking for family members that had either been sold away from them, or they had been separated somehow along the road, or maybe they had like their mom's sister and they know that they have cousins that they can't find. But Hattie, the slave girl, was separated from her entire family. So she is using the newspaper that they find along the way to try to find her family, and she is trying to help, with the help of the girl who is mixed race. They're trying to help people along the way find their family members, and because Hattie can't read, but the girl who's mixed race can read and write, and so she's writing things out and helping Hattie do that. So, I feel like the girl who's mixed race is a horrible description. But the half-daughter of the daughter of the plantation owner who's not related to his wife, it's just confusing for me. But anyways, I did give this 3 stars. Part of the reason was because it's not own voices. It's written by a white woman. And that's not the only reason. Like, I didn't just see that it was a white author and say, oh, I'm going to give that 3 stars. That's not really how I do things. But it just made me more cautious of the representation that was in it. Also, I have a thing where dialect only works for certain things. And the half of the book that was written in the 1870s, or that was like set in that time, was completely in dialect. And it was so choppy and just didn't feel, it took me out of the story a lot. Which is interesting because I much preferred the 80s timeline, the 1980s timeline. Which I think part of it is because I love the 80s. So for me, just anything set in the 80s makes me like it more. My boyfriend read this book and he much preferred the 1870s timeline. So it's interesting that we liked different things about it. I need to do this before the sun is completely covering my face and ruining this whole thing. So we're moving on. Then I read Death's End by Cixin Liu, which is the 3rd and final book in the Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy, which is a hard science fiction, first contact with aliens type book. I'm not going to tell you what this is about because obviously it's the 3rd book in a trilogy and I don't want to ruin it. But I did give this 4 stars. I've given all the other books in that trilogy 5 stars. So I liked it the least. And there were several reasons for that. One of the reasons is that one of the things that they do in this book is people go into hibernation. And then they are awakened like 200 years later or whatever. And usually it happens like once in a book and it makes a lot of sense. In this one, it happened so many times that I just didn't care anymore. I was like, it felt like he was rushing to finish the series a little bit. It's still phenomenal. I just wanted to feel more attached to these last characters and I felt like I didn't. So that's why I gave it 4 stars instead of 5, but highly recommend. The whole series is like a 5 star, 5 out of 5 star for me. So I would recommend it if you're interested in that kind of thing. The last book that I read this month was Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. Is that correct? Aiden Thomas is a non-binary author, from what I understand. They use they pronouns. So, yes, Cemetery Boys follows a trans boy who is part of I always say cult religion, but I don't mean cult in a bad way. I just mean a specialized religion called the Bruhux. I don't know how that's pronounced. Brujo with an X instead of Bruch X. I don't know. But I never had to say it out loud, so it's confusing to have to say it out loud. But they're basically witches. They don't like that term, but brujo means witch in Spanish, or bruja means witch, I guess. Brujo would be the masculine. Doesn't matter. But it's his family's religion, and it's leading up to Dia de Muertos, which is when the dead can walk the earth again. But in this fantasy world, only people who are part of the Bruhux clan can come back. on Dia de Muertos. And Yadriel is this trans boy who wants to prove that he's a brujo because he knows he is, but his family's having a really hard time accepting his gender identity. So to do this, he tries to bring back his murdered cousin and accidentally brings back a boy from his school. And so he's trying to figure out how to release this boy from his school's spirit back to the spirit world. And the boy is like, no, you can't do that. I have some loose ends I need to tie up. So I want you to help me tie up my loose ends. And then I'll let you send me back, no problem. There's a little bit of a romance between the dead boy and the live boy, which, why does YA do that? So I didn't like it. There were also some continuity issues, some like timeline issues. If you've read it, you might know that really bothered me. And like, I don't know. I just feel like I would have liked it more had there not been a romance aspect. I just thought that it didn't need the romance and that it could have just had the friendship thing. Also, I thought the romance played out kind of weird. But that's just my opinion on that. What I mean by that, I feel like I need to say, so the romance goes very 0 to 100 real quick, which in YA it tends to do. I feel like sometimes it works better than other times, and in this time it didn't really work for me personally. I felt like there were enough interesting plot points to where that wasn't necessary, and I wish it didn't happen. But I didn't mention I gave Cemetery Boys 3 stars. But yeah, those are the 12 books that I read in the month of September. If you've read any of these books, let me know down below how you felt about them. That is going to be it for me today. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up. If you would like to follow me on Instagram, Goodreads, or Twitter, all of that will be linked down in the description box below. If you want, I'm right now doing a reading challenge where I try to read 1 book a day and I'm vlogging the experience. So if you are interested in following along with that, make sure you subscribe to this channel. The first vlog is already up. I will link it in the cards and down below. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. And I'll see you on Sunday. Bye!